At that point, the U.S., following a similar pattern to Afghanistan, completely abandoned their former allies. Frustrated and broke, Saddam and the Ba'athists invaded Kuwait in 1990. Invasion of their close fundamentalist feudal allies in Kuwait was completely unacceptable to the U.S., and combined with the fear of a Saudi invasion, made the invasion of Iraq on the agenda. So they invaded and pushed Saddam's army back. But they did stop. They didn't go all the way to occupation like they did now. Why did they stop? Well, the Soviet Union, which had actually participated in the war, was still in existence, although in a dilapidated state. So the U.S. feared the consequences of occupation would be greater than the benefit. I look at what we're going through now in Iraq bears this out, even without the fear of nuclear annihilation. So the USSR fell, and all the nationalized economies of the world collapsed. Not just the fully nationalized ones like the USSR and Eastern Europe, but even nationalized sectors within capitalist economies began to open up with the whole world being forced to lean on the United States. The U.S. and its puppets in the IMF and the World Bank helped push through a series of trade agreements, such as NAFTA and GATT, to forcefully privatize anything and everything of the world's industries. Since the U.S. was, and is the world's largest economy, they were the largest beneficiaries of said agreements. The nations that refused to go along with this became the enemy targets of America, Iraq remaining one of them. But Clinton generally relied on the economic force of the newly unipolar world to drive open the world's economies. For that reason, most of the wars he carried out were not full-scale ground invasions, but generally smaller-scale bombing campaigns like in Yugoslavia, Sudan, Afghanistan, and of course Iraq, which was bombed continually during the 13-year period between the two Iraq wars. But the crisis of capitalism began to reach new and more profound depths. The rate of profit was in continual decline, particularly after 1999. The Asian economic crisis and the dot-com bust were the signs of the capitalist boom that happened after the denationalization of the world economies was at an end. From that point on, capitalism began to rely more and more on booms based on speculation. The need to find a more sustainable source of economic prosperity drove the U.S. rulers to rethink the need for hot wars again. 9/11 gave them the pretext that they needed to complete their drive against Iraq, which would give them the ability to eradicate the last bastions of nationalization in the world. If you look at a map, and I wish I had one, but if you look at a map, where Afghanistan is located, I think it kind of gives you maybe a key understanding as to why this is where they started, It's located right next to Iran, which is right next to Iraq, which is right next to Syria, which is right next to Lebanon, which is right next to Palestine, which is near Sudan, Libya, and Somalia. It's essentially a straight shot directly across the map, and there's no doubt, in my mind, that this was their original intention. Most of the regimes that had not opened up their economies as much as the West would have liked, or the enemies of the U.S., or were enemies of the U.S. for one reason or another, and also happened to be on the largest reserves of what remains of the world's oil, are all clustered together on the globe. Right for the picking now that the USSR was out of the way. The next 6 years were years of big booms and bulls for Wall Street. A very large speculation bubble in the housing markets has started to grow to unimaginable lengths. The government itself was finding a bit of a bubble on selling off parts of itself to contractors and private firms generally. Protections for consumers from loan sharks started to disappear. The Federal Reserve kept interest rates incredibly low, fueling the ever-unsustainable housing and consumer credit booms. People bought houses as investments instead of just living quarters, hoping the price would continually go up. Working people with wages dropping continually since the mid-1970s were using credit as a means of basic survival. After the bust, many were unable to pay their debts, a lot of times going into bankruptcy and foreclosure. The U.S. government actually started to look more and more the way it did in the late 1800s during the Gilded Age. Despite what the Tea Partiers are saying, there has never been a time in history when capitalism has been more fully realized in this country, especially between the years 2001 and 2007. And then, of course, the crash came. So the gambit that the war would be a boom for the economy ended up being a sucker's bet. War is profitable for individual capitalists, but it's an investment for the capitalist class as a whole. While the Bush clique made off like bandits with everybody's hand in a jar, the rest of the nation was left more bankrupt than it already didn't realize it was. Bush is, of course, an oil man. Cheney is a former defense contractor, as we heard in the movie. virtual monopoly on contracting in Iraq. But the massive increase in oil prices ended up exacerbating the crisis for the rest of the nation, including the rest of the ruling rich. The shoddy work of the private firms and contractors were designed to increase profits at the expense of the war effort. So much of the money being spent by taxpayers is being completely wasted. A scam has been perpetrated on the American people. On top of the massive corruption, Bush is incredibly stupid and short-sighted. He entered Iraq and Afghanistan with almost no pretext and absolutely no exit strategy whatsoever. Because of this, not to mention the anger of the betrayed American masses, the Bush clique became the sole target of much of the capitalist class and media generally. And generally for good reason. Here's the thing. Costs and corruption are acceptable things to the rich if they end up bringing in larger returns than they invested. For them, if the war had been finished in a few months, and the oil had been thoroughly privatized and siphoned off to international investors, and relative social peace remained throughout the region, they would not have had any problems with the conduct of the war. As things stand though, the war is not over in Iraq, and it's costing billions and billions of dollars, while oil is still not flowing due to terrorism and oil workers struggling to maintain the nationalization. Even today, it's technically still nationalized, since denationalization plans started fomenting an uprising among the oil workers, who violated, by the way, the American Occupation Authority, Paul Bremer, who extended a ban on unionization for state workers, and they formed a union, one of the most powerful and a very political union in Iraq. On top of that, the war is also not over in Afghanistan, where foreign invaders have never been able to maintain their ground. The mountainous regions there are extremely porous. Underground tunnels are everywhere after centuries of foreign occupation. Even if bin Laden is dead, an insurgency could last for decades or longer hiding in that country. The cost right now to each individual taxpayer for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan is approximately $6,836. That's approximately $911,528,360,000, almost $1 trillion for the nation as a whole. This is at a time when the nation is facing its greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression. The current Obama plan of paying for the war and economic crisis with printed and borrowed money is a recipe for hyperinflation. In this, the Tea Partiers aren't wrong. We see some stabilization in the economy right now based on a decrease in panic selling due to trillions of invented dollars flooding the market. And right now, the war can't be paid for in any other way, while the government itself is virtually bankrupt. Despite all this, Obama is unable and or unwilling to extract himself from either country. The rich class that he works for is divided on what to do exactly. Some want deals made with other countries, with local fundamentalist militias, where they can maybe set up some kind of government, where they can have, even if they have to leave at some point, at least they have some kind of exit strategy. Some of them want to have stable governments in both countries and are willing to expend more money on it. In general, though, there's no section that doesn't want to have permanent bases in both countries, maintain a permanent presence. And Obama himself has stated that he wants a permanent presence in both countries. For now, invasions, and on top of all that, right now invasions of other countries are basically out of the question. So whatever other plans they had on Iran or Syria or Lebanon, at this point Lebanon's changed its government, but whatever plans they had on other countries, they're not interested in fulfilling those. Now they just want to kind of pull out as much as they possibly can while maintaining as much of a presence as they possibly can. The truth is that we're headed straight for a cliff right now. If currency becomes too devalued, massive reserves other countries have in U.S. dollars may be dumped for other currencies that are more stable. The devaluation of the dollar could end up looking like Zimbabwe's 1,000,000% inflation, or pre-Hitler Germany's wheelbarrows of dollars for loaves of bread. Additionally, tariff walls are beginning to erect throughout the world, which will have an effect similar to the ending of blood circulation in a body. The real pain in the last Great Depression started when protectionism took hold. Obama has just placed tariffs on tires from China, a move to help protect the American tire industry. Let's not forget that China is the U.S.'s #1 trading partner, and this could have disastrous repercussions. basically, what I'm saying is a giant tiger is being backed into a corner. There's no telling what the U.S. can do in that situation. Wars in new and unexpected places could occur without vigilance. World War II is what saved capitalism last time. This time, another world war could easily end the world. In my opinion, the only way out is through a thorough transformation of society where the profit motive is eliminated and where government is not run by the super rich but by working people. Until then, the prognosis for this country, in my opinion, is going to be dire.